My name is Bonnie Hudson, and I'm 51 years old now, old enough to recognize when love turns quiet and when quiet turns into something else. 13 years ago, I left Texas because life didn't give me options, only deadlines. People love to say family first, like it's a warm slogan you can hang on a kitchen wall. But when my father passed away, family first became a burden I carried alone, and it didn't feel warm at all. It felt like a ledger. It felt like responsibility wrapped around my throat. Dad had owned a construction business in our town. He'd built half the streets people drove on every day. After the funeral, the condolence casseroles stopped, the hugs loosened, and the paperwork arrived like an avalanche. Suddenly, I was staring at contracts, payroll, equipment leases, things my father had managed with calm hands, and a cigarette tucked behind his ear. I had a husband, Jason, 48, who hugged me and promised, "We'll get through it." We had two daughters, still little then, about 10 and 8, and their world was simple: school, friends, snacks, bedtime. They didn't know the roof over their heads had started to crack. And then the country cracked too. The Great Recession hit like a slow-motion car crash. At first, it was just one client postponing a project, then another canceling, then a bank calling with that tight, polite tone that means they've already decided you're a risk. Housing bubble, economic collapse, big words on the news. To me, it was invoices stacked on the counter and my savings bleeding out to keep employees paid. It was waking up at 3 a.m. with my heart hammering, running numbers in my head like prayers. We tried everything. Jason and I drained what we had. I sold equipment. I begged for extensions. I told myself if I could just make it through one more month, something would turn around. Nothing turned around. The business went bankrupt. Bankrupt is such a clean word for a messy death. It meant the thing my father built with his hands was gone. It meant our income vanished. It meant I became someone I barely recognized, smiling for my kids, then crying in the bathroom with my mouth pressed against a towel so no one would hear. I was drowning, and I couldn't let my family see it. So I did what a lot of desperate people do. I ran toward the only door that looked open. I started looking for opportunities overseas. Not because I wanted adventure, not because I wanted to find myself, because the bills didn't care about my grief, because my daughters needed stability, because my mother, my mom, was getting older, and I was already the one quietly paying for things she didn't mention out loud. I tried my luck in different Asian countries, chasing leads, making calls, pitching myself like I was selling a version of my life that wasn't exhausted. Eventually, I managed to set up a new venture in Dubai. That period was the hardest of my life. For over a year, I didn't have a real home. I lived out of suitcases and temporary rentals, eating alone, sleeping alone, working until my eyes burned. Dubai was dazzling from the outside. Glass towers, bright lights, money everywhere. But inside my apartment, it was just me and the hum of the air conditioner, staring at family photos like they belonged to someone else. Jason and the girls stayed in Texas. At first, we told ourselves it was temporary. The girls were in school. They didn't want to move. Jason said it would disrupt their education. He said Texas was home. He said my mom needed them close. I tried to be understanding, I really did. Once my venture started taking shape, I began flying back every 5 to 6 months. Those trips became my oxygen. I'd arrive in Texas exhausted, and the first night I'd lie in my own bed with Jason beside me and think, this is what normal feels like. This is what I'm working for. But normal never lasted long. Every visit ended with me packing again. Every goodbye at the airport felt like tearing off skin. Time did what time always does. It moved forward without asking permission. My daughters grew up. They graduated. They moved out to Houston, one after the other, chasing careers and independence. 23 and 21 now. Full adults with their own lives. I was proud of them, of course. But with that pride came a strange emptiness. Because the reason Jason and I had lived like long-distance strangers was gone. That's when I started to hope. Last year, my youngest finished college and got a job at her older sister's company. She was about to move out of the house. I planned a vacation to Texas, determined to spend time with her before she stepped fully into adulthood. During that trip, I sat with Jason at our kitchen table, same table where my daughters used to spill cereal and argue over homework. And I said it carefully. Jason, now that the girls are out, what if you come to Dubai with me? I expected him to pause, to consider, to at least ask questions. Instead, he refused almost immediately. No, he said, too quick. I can't. Your mom. She's getting fragile. So I tried another angle. Then Mom can come with us. We can all go. Jason's face tightened like I'd insulted him. And when my mom heard, she reacted the same way, like Dubai wasn't a place, it was a threat. They talked about culture, about familiarity, about not leaving their hometown, Middle Eastern life being too different. I understood their concerns, I really did, so I didn't push. But I wasn't done talking. On that same trip, I told Jason something else, something I'd been carrying in my chest for months. I'm thinking of wrapping up the business in Dubai, I said, and moving back to Texas. I thought he'd smile, thought he'd be relieved, thought he'd say, finally. Instead, he looked at me like I'd announced something reckless. Why would you do that? He asked. I blinked. Because I miss home. I miss you. Jason leaned back, arms crossed, eyes narrowed. You worked too hard to build something there. Why throw it away? The words stung because they were logical, but logic wasn't the point. I wasn't asking to throw anything away. I was asking to come home. I tried to reassure him, like I always did. Our lifestyle won't suffer, I said. I'll still take care of us financially. I always have. Jason's gaze slid away from mine. It's not about money, he muttered. But everything in our life seemed to orbit money lately. Like my presence didn't matter as long as the support arrived on time. The next day I got hit with a curveball. My mother showed up at the house, out of the blue, her expression already prepared. Bonnie, she said, squeezing my hands, don't make a hasty decision. My stomach dipped. What decision? She hesitated, just a flicker, then launched into the exact same arguments Jason had used the night before, word for word. The culture, the stability, the idea that I should stay in Dubai. I hadn't told her my plans. I hadn't told anyone, so the only way she knew was Jason. And in that moment, a cold thought landed in my mind. They're talking about me when I'm not there. Not casually, not lovingly, strategically. It shook me more than I wanted to admit. Still, I backed off. I dropped the idea of moving home because maybe they were right. Maybe I was rushing. Maybe I was just lonely and romanticizing Texas. But when I flew back to Dubai, something inside me dimmed. My calls to Jason became less frequent without me even deciding it. I stopped texting good morning. I stopped checking in every night. And Jason didn't notice. Days would pass without a word, and when we did talk, it felt transactional. Updates about the house, about my mom, about the girls. Like I was an off-site manager, not a wife. Last month, I finally asked the question I'd been choking on. Do you love me anymore? I said quietly. Jason laughed like I was being dramatic. You're overthinking. I'm busy. Your mom needs help. The house. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to cling to the fact that he cared for my mother so well, that my mom always sounded grateful when she mentioned him. I told myself I should be thankful. But unease doesn't go away just because you shame yourself for feeling it. Late at night, alone in Dubai, staring at the ceiling while the city glittered outside my window, one thought kept circling. What if he doesn't want me home? Because someone else already lives in that space. I hated myself for suspecting him. Jason had been a good father. He'd kept life steady while I worked abroad. He'd never been reckless, never been the type to flirt in front of me or chase attention. He was too controlled, too prepared, and that scared me more than chaos ever could. So I made a decision. I booked a flight to Texas and told no one. Not Jason, not my mom, not my daughters. I told myself it would be a surprise visit. But deep down, I knew the truth. I wasn't going home to celebrate. I was going home to catch whatever was hiding in plain sight. I landed in Texas just after noon, the sun hanging low and heavy, like it remembered me better than the people waiting at home. I didn't text Jason when my plane touched down. I didn't call. I wanted the surprise to be clean. No time to rehearse, no time to erase, no time to coordinate stories. I even stopped by a florist near the airport and bought a bouquet I knew he liked to pretend he didn't care about. White lilies. Familiar. Safe. The drive home felt longer than I remembered. Every mile marker stirred up muscle memory. School drop-offs, grocery runs, late-night drives with coffee going cold in the cup holder. This road had once been my entire world. When I pulled into the driveway, nothing looked wrong. The lawn was trimmed. The porch light was off, even though it was dim enough that it should have been on, a detail so small I wouldn't have noticed it before. I let myself in with my spare key. "Jason," I called out. Footsteps, too quick, too startled. He appeared in the hallway like I'd caught him mid-thought. For a split second, just a fraction, his face drained of color. Then the smile snapped on, sharp and delayed, like a mask fitted a moment too late. "Bonnie?" His voice cracked upward. "What are you doing here?" I held up the flowers. "Surprise." He laughed, but it sounded thin, like it scraped on the way out. You should have told me." "I wanted to see your face," I said lightly. "Guess I got my wish." He took the bouquet, fumbling, then pulled me into a hug that felt wrong. Too stiff, too careful. His arms wrapped around me like he was checking for witnesses. For the rest of that day, Jason hovered. He asked too many questions. When was my flight booked? How long I was staying? Whether work in Dubai was really slowing down. The house felt curated, like a showroom. Clean, but empty. Lived in, but somehow stripped of personality. That night, lying beside him in bed, I stared at the ceiling while he slept, or pretended to. His breathing wasn't deep enough for real sleep. I knew his rhythms. This wasn't one of them. I told myself not to spiral. I told myself jet lag made everything feel off. But the feeling didn't fade. Over the next few days, I watched. I watched how Jason guarded his phone, how it never left his side, not even when he went to shower. I watched how he stepped outside to take calls he used to take right in front of me. I watched how he flinched whenever I mentioned my mom, like the topic carried static. And then there were the errands. Jason suddenly had places to be in the afternoons. Hardware store runs, supplies, repairs. He said it casually, like it was nothing, like it had always been that way. But I didn't remember it being that way. One afternoon, I followed him. I hated myself for it. I sat in my car 2 blocks away, feeling ridiculous and desperate. This wasn't who I was. I had always believed trust was a decision you made daily, not something you policed. But trust had been quietly eroding for years, and I was only just noticing the hollow underneath. Jason parked outside a small hardware shop on the edge of town. Nothing fancy. Old signage, dusty windows, the kind of place you'd drive past without ever really seeing. He went inside. I waited. 10 minutes passed, then 20. Long enough that I started second-guessing myself. Maybe he was just shopping. Maybe I was inventing drama because 13 years apart had warped my brain. Then the front shutters came down. Not all the way, just enough to block the view. My stomach dropped so hard I thought I might throw up. I didn't confront him that day. I didn't even follow him home. I drove aimlessly until my hands stopped shaking, telling myself there had to be a reasonable explanation. Maybe the owner closed early. Maybe Jason was helping with something in the back. Reasonable explanations are easy when you're afraid of the alternative. That night, Jason acted normal, almost too normal. He cooked dinner. He asked about my trip. He kissed my forehead like it was muscle memory. I smiled back and felt something crack inside me. Over the next week, I noticed patterns. The hardware store wasn't random. It was frequent, predictable, like an appointment disguised as an errand. Always mid-afternoon, always just long enough to be suspicious. And then came the detail that made my skin go cold. My mom mentioned the shop. "Oh, I stopped by that hardware place again today," she said casually over lunch. "Jason likes the owner. She's helpful." She. I froze. She? My mom nodded, sipping her tea. "Yes, nice woman, knows her stuff." I didn't ask anything else. I didn't trust my voice not to shake. That night, I lay awake, replaying every conversation from the past few years. Every time Jason had said he was busy. Every time my mom had praised him. Every time I'd felt a strange comfort knowing they had each other while I was gone. Comfort turned sour fast. 2 days later, I followed them both. My mom said she needed to run errands. Jason offered to drive her. I told myself not to read into it. Families did things together all the time. But my gut was screaming now. They stopped at the hardware store. I parked across the street, heart pounding so loudly I was sure it would give me away. The shop owner stepped outside. She was younger than I expected. Confident, familiar in the way people get when they've crossed boundaries and stopped caring who sees. She greeted Jason with a smile that lingered too long. Then, like it was the most natural thing in the world, she leaned in and kissed him. Not on the cheek, on the mouth. My vision tunneled, and then the impossible happened. My mother smiled at her. Not awkward, not shocked, warm, comfortable. The shop owner hugged my mom. The shutter came down again. I don't remember getting out of the car. I don't remember crossing the street. I only remember my fist pounding against metal, the sound echoing like a gunshot in my ears. The door opened a crack. The woman's face went pale when she saw me. "Where's my husband?" I demanded. She stammered. Jason's name stuck in her throat like a lie too big to swallow. I pushed past her. The back room was dim, cluttered with boxes and tools, and there he was. Jason, startled, guilty, barely dressed. In that moment, 13 years collapsed into a single brutal truth. The shouting blurred together. The shop owner tried to pull me back. Jason yelled my name like it could undo what I was seeing. There was a scuffle, hands grabbing, someone stumbling, something crashing to the floor. I don't remember throwing the punch. I only remember the sound it made. I left shaking, numb, unreal. I didn't go home. I went straight to my mother's house. She opened the door, already crying, like she'd been warned. You knew, I said, my voice hollow. You knew, and you let this happen. She reached for me. I pulled away. Behind me, a car pulled into the driveway. Jason! And suddenly, everything that had been hidden was standing in the open, trembling, waiting to be named. I don't remember sitting down, but suddenly I was on my mother's couch, my hands clenched so tightly together my fingers ached. Jason stood in the doorway like a stranger who'd wandered into the wrong house. The woman from the hardware store, Marla, I'd later learn, wasn't there, but her presence hung in the air like smoke. My mother hovered between us, wringing her hands, tears already sliding down her face, before I'd even said another word. You knew, I repeated, slower this time. Both of you knew. My mother shook her head, sobbing softly, but she didn't deny it. That was the part that hurt the most. Not the silence, her surrender. Jason took a step toward me. Bonnie, please, let's not do this here. Here? I laughed, sharp and broken. Here is exactly where we're doing this. You don't get to choose the setting after 8 years of lying. My mother gasped. Jason froze. 8? She whispered. Jason's shoulders slumped. The truth finally weighed more than the performance. 7. Maybe 8, he admitted. I don't know. It just happened. I stood up so fast the room tilted. It just happened? I repeated. You didn't trip and fall into someone's mouth, Jason. He flinched. Good. My mother reached for my arm. Bonnie, please, listen. From our side... Our side? My voice cracked. You have a side now? She sobbed harder, clutching her chest. You left us. You were gone all the time. Jason was lonely. I was lonely. We were all alone. The words landed like slaps. I stared at her, trying to reconcile the woman in front of me with the mother who'd taught me right from wrong, who'd scolded me as a teenager for staying out too late, who'd raised me to believe loyalty was sacred. You weren't alone, I said. You had each other. You had my money. You had my house. You had my sacrifices. I was the one alone. Jason stepped in then, voice low, pleading. Bonnie, I love you. I never wanted a divorce. Marla, she doesn't mean anything. She was just a way to cope. I felt something inside me snap, not loudly, but cleanly. 8 years, I said. You coped for 8 years. He tried to touch me. I moved back. Why didn't you leave? I demanded. If you were so miserable, why didn't you divorce me? He looked at the floor. That told me everything. Because the marriage was convenient. Because I paid for the life they enjoyed. Because as long as I stayed abroad, silent and reliable, no one had to change anything. My mother knelt in front of me then, gripping my hands. I know you hate me, she cried. But think about it from my perspective. You left me here. Jason was there for me. He helped me. He listened. So that makes it okay? I asked quietly. She didn't answer. That silence felt heavier than any confession. I pulled my hands free and grabbed my bag. I'm leaving. Jason panicked. Bonnie, don't. Let's talk. Let's fix this. I turned on him, every nerve screaming. You don't get to ask for calm after destroying my reality. I walked out. That night, I didn't sleep. I drove until dawn, parked somewhere unfamiliar, and stared at the steering wheel until my eyes burned. My mind replayed everything, every visit, every call, every time I'd felt uneasy and talked myself out of it. I kept asking the same poisonous question. Was this my fault? I'd been gone. I'd worked too much. I'd chosen survival over presence. Maybe I'd built this distance brick by brick without noticing. But even as guilt tried to wrap itself around my throat, another truth rose up, steady and unmovable. Loneliness doesn't force betrayal. Choice does. The next morning, I drove to Houston. My daughters deserved the truth from me, not a twisted version fed to them later. They were adults now. They could handle reality. We sat in a quiet cafe and I told them everything. I didn't soften it. I didn't dramatize it. I just told the truth. They cried. My older daughter clenched her jaw, furious. My younger one looked shattered, caught between loyalty and disbelief. We suspected something, the older one admitted quietly. Mom and Grandma, they were always together. It felt off. That hurt in a different way, that even my children had sensed what I'd missed. I stayed with them for 2 days, grounding myself in their presence. Before I left, I made a decision I'd been circling since the night before. I packed my things from the house, quietly. No confrontations, no announcements. Then I flew back overseas. I didn't block Jason or my mother. I didn't yell or threaten. I did something far more unsettling for them. I disappeared. I froze the bank accounts. I canceled the credit cards. I cut off the steady flow of money that had cushioned their lives for years. The calls started almost immediately. Apologies at first, long messages about regret and misunderstanding, Jason begging me to come home and talk like adults, my mother crying about being abandoned in her old age, invoking my father's name like a weapon. I didn't respond. Then the tone shifted. Concern replaced remorse. Bonnie, the accounts aren't working. Bonnie, we need to talk about the bills. Bonnie, this is serious. I let the silence answer for me. Jason went to my daughters next, just like I'd predicted. He tried to paint himself as a victim, claimed I'd cut them off without explanation, even hinted that maybe I had someone else overseas. But my daughters shut that down fast. They knew the truth now. The older one refused to help him. The younger tried, out of guilt, out of love, but even she couldn't sustain it on her entry-level salary. Eventually, she told him to get a job. He didn't like that. The fantasy unraveled quickly after that. Jason couldn't marry Marla, not without a divorce, and a divorce wouldn't benefit him the way staying married had. He sent threats then, legal consequences, cross-border nonsense meant to scare me. I didn't care. Last I heard, he was working at Marla's hardware store. Reality is rarely as glamorous as betrayal imagines it will be. As for my mother, I don't know what the future holds. Part of me still aches for her. Another part knows apology without accountability is just noise. I travel now. I keep busy. I rebuild. Not because I'm healed, but because I refuse to be reduced to a resource ever again. And maybe one day, when the anger fades, I'll decide what forgiveness actually costs. Silence changes people. I learned that in the weeks after I cut Jason and my mother off, not just emotionally, but financially. At first, I told myself I wasn't doing it to punish them. I needed distance. I needed space to breathe without being pulled back into explanations and justifications that made my chest feel tight. But the truth is, silence has weight. And when you've been carrying everyone else for years, putting that weight down feels like learning how to walk again. The first month, the calls were constant. Jason left long voicemails that swung wildly between regret and entitlement. One minute he was apologizing, voice breaking, saying he'd made a mistake and wanted to fix our marriage. The next, he was irritated, asking why the credit cards weren't working, why the accounts were frozen, why I hadn't warned him, as if warning had ever stopped him from betraying me. My mother's messages were worse in a different way. They were soaked in guilt and memory. She invoked my father often, how disappointed he'd be, how heartbroken he'd feel seeing me abandon her in her old age. She talked about her health, about being scared, about how she'd said she was sorry. But she never once said what she was sorry for. That omission mattered. I listened to every message. I didn't delete them. I needed to hear them without responding, to understand the pattern. When money disappeared, remorse showed up. When comfort vanished, panic replaced confidence. And that told me everything I needed to know. Jason eventually showed up at my daughter's doors, emotionally, not physically. He called them separately, testing angles like a salesman. To my older daughter, he played the wounded husband, claiming I'd lost perspective overseas. She shut him down immediately. To my younger daughter, he tried something else. He cried. He said he didn't know how he'd pay the bills. He hinted that maybe I was having an affair too, that maybe that's why I'd reacted so harshly. She called me afterward, voice trembling. "Mom, is any of that true?" I took a deep breath before answering. "No, and I'm proud of you for asking me directly." She tried to help him for a while, sending small amounts from her first paycheck, skipping things she needed so he and my mother wouldn't struggle. When I found out, my heart broke in a way I hadn't expected. Not because she helped him, but because she felt responsible for cleaning up something that was never hers to fix. Eventually, even she reached her limit. She told Jason he needed to get a job, that she couldn't keep supporting him, that he was an adult. He lashed out. He accused her of choosing me over him, of being ungrateful, of abandoning family. History repeating itself, just with a different target. After that, she stopped sending money. That's when the threats started. Jason sent emails outlining all the things he could do legally if I didn't cooperate. Divorce, international complications, consequences. He used words meant to sound authoritative, hoping I'd panic. I didn't. I wasn't hiding, I wasn't running, I was simply no longer available to be manipulated. A divorce, ironically, would benefit him more than me. It would free him to marry Marla. It would give him access to settlements he hadn't earned. And it would cost me time, energy, and peace. So I didn't rush into it. The marriage existed on paper, but emotionally, it was already over. Last I heard through mutual acquaintances, Jason was working full-time at Marla's hardware shop, the same place he'd hidden in for years. The affair that had once felt thrilling now looked small and cramped. Long hours, low pay, and no fantasy left to hide behind. Marla lived in a camper. She had an ailing father to care for. There was no grand new life waiting for him, just reality. As for my mother, she survived. Her pension covered the basics. The lifestyle she'd grown accustomed to, the comfort I'd quietly funded, was gone. Sometimes, late at night, I feel a flicker of guilt about that. She did apologize eventually, but it felt rushed, like something she said because the consequences had finally arrived, not because she truly understood what she'd done. Maybe one day she will. Maybe one day I'll feel ready to hear it. For now, distance is the only honest thing I can offer. I didn't move back to Texas. I didn't stay still either. I traveled. China, Bali, places I'd only seen on screens before. Not to escape my grief, but to remind myself that the world was bigger than the betrayal that once defined my days. Dubai isn't the fantasy people imagine. It's strict, expensive, demanding. But it gave me something Texas hadn't been able to give me anymore: perspective. I'm not dating. I'm not trying to replace anything. I'm learning how to exist without being needed for my money, my labor, or my silence. Healing isn't dramatic. It doesn't come with closure speeches or perfect endings. It comes quietly, when you stop checking your phone, when your shoulders relax without you noticing, when you realize you're no longer afraid of being alone. I still love my daughters fiercely. I still carry complicated feelings about my mother. I don't hate Jason. I just see him clearly now. And clarity, I've learned, is freedom. If there's one thing this chapter taught me, it's this: being loyal doesn't mean disappearing for the comfort of others. And love that only survives on your sacrifice isn't love, it's dependence. I'm no longer anyone's backup plan. I'm building a life that doesn't require me to abandon myself to keep it intact.